Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us up here today. We're so lucky to have these two incredible photographic artists with us, Aishah Kenton and John Feely. So both of them were on different categories this year in the Australian Photography Awards. And one of the best things that we get to do is reach out to emerging artists and established artists and get to work with them. Basically, we just pick our favourite people and ask them to be on the committee, and then we get to hear all their wonderful ideas and thoughts about photography. And we're so lucky to be able to open that up to you guys today. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to you guys.
Cool. Hello, everyone. So we're moderating our own talk.
Yeah.
So I'm starting off quite awkwardly, but yeah, great to see so many people here. I walked in earlier and was like, oh my God, there's so many more people come to this event than I realised, which is a bit scary. So yeah, welcome. First of all, I suppose the great thing to mention from the beginning is if you have any questions or you have anything that you'd like to discuss that we can kind of discuss together, please throw it in the mix.
Yeah, it's a very free-flowing.
Yeah, so we have rehearsed this talk twice. We went to go for an hour and went for 3. So we're not going to run out of material. But if you have anything that's really pressing for you, I'm sure it's pressing for other people in the room. It's probably pressing for me as well. So please, yeah, just become a part of things and yeah, throw your thoughts into the mix. Yeah, so we had a couple of points just to kind of guide us about where we wanted to talk to. They're all,
I guess, like based around documentary photographers. I guess we can call ourselves. You'd probably, yeah, documentary photographers. And so this is what I guess the talk will be based about.
Yeah, and like I sort of alluded to downstairs, it's actually a really, really broad area. It interacts with commerce and media and art and all sorts of things. So yeah, we were just going to talk about different applications of it, specifically how it works for us, and also how it comes from us more than it comes from photography. So it's kind of, for both of us, we kind of realise photography has become a bit of an unwrapping more than an adding to things. So we'll talk about all our deepest, darkest secrets. Yeah, for me, should I go first? Because I'm already talking. Yeah. Okay. So I definitely consider myself a documentary photographer simply because I interact with real life. I try my hardest to make sure that things aren't done for the camera. And of course, you never really know. And of course, you never get that entirely. But that's really important to me. And I think it's really important at this time, especially over the last 5 years and especially at the moment. There's this thing out there called Instagram. I don't know if you guys have heard it, which means that photography is now mostly people that take pictures, not people that are really invested in the craft of photography, which I'm sure there's a lot of people in the room here that are. So basically it's about people documenting their lives, and that is 99.9% of the photography in the world. I'd say 10 years ago that probably was the case, but a lot less so. And the other thing that's become really big is the influence of design and branding in everything that we do, especially in the first world. So everyone has an opportunity to become a brand of themselves or present themselves. And of course, that's everything from what I chose to wear, which I deliberated over this morning, to hold it up a little bit more. Okay. So I think documentary photography, where people are authentically living their lives in front of a camera, and what that can say is more important now than, as far as I'm concerned, that it's ever been. It's really rare. It's the rarest it's probably ever been. And it allows us to reveal things that are more true than preferred. And that doesn't mean that all the topics and things that we photograph are difficult. It means that there are a chance for photographers and for people that we collaborate with to become kind of vulnerable. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a really great way to connect people and connect things. That's why I think probably everyone in this room making what they're making at the moment is really, 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 really important. I think the world generally is quite amateur in the way that it makes pictures, and that idea of who you want to be or how you want to present and who you actually are, there's a really big gap, to the point where it's actually quite confused and muddy. So, that was what documentary was to me. Handball.
Thanks, John. I think that was really great. And I think for me, photographing the ordinary and like personal stories in my practice is really important, and that's how I approach documentary photography. For a while, I felt really uncomfortable putting those personal stories out, but as I started to continue to do that, I realised that small personal stories are actually really universal, and people can really relate to that. And I think at the core of documentary photography is personal storytelling. And being constantly open and curious about your surroundings. And even though I started in a personal documentary sense, I feel like when it is time to document other people, they're not in my personal realm, that the personal documentary within my own life has aided that really well. So I guess process, like approaching people, when I've for so long had to look at myself and I guess my family and personal relationships, that definitely kind of helped my approach with documenting my wider world.
Which you've changed. You're doing something slightly different at the moment, aren't you? So we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah.
You've kind of branched out beyond that. Yeah. So sort of following on from that, there's this idea, like I said, there's lots of different approaches to documentary. I study with someone over in the Netherlands who's very interested in a specific stream of documentary photography called conceptual documentary. As I alluded to downstairs, it's kind of essentially about talking about something that you can't see, which sounds ridiculous in the field of photography, but through a series of images or through a certain perspective or something is revealed that you don't normally see. And I definitely think that's one of the most powerful things photography can do. And based on what you were saying about that, I think that idea that in the way that we act in our daily lives and the small things that we do, being able to say something really big about our time or really big about what's going on in the world based on, you know, the flowers that your mother has in her window or something like that is one of the great things that you can do as a documentary photographer.
I think like just hearing you speak like subtle, like being really subtle. I think often in conceptual documentary, you're talking about bigger ideas to yourself or the world, but it's often really subtle and it's kind of open to your audience as well.
Yeah. So kind of just that having that contrast in your work automatically kind of makes it really, really powerful, I think. And you can do it the other way around as well. There's some amazing work that's at this is going to happen a lot, by the way. I'm going to go to name a photographer and then I'm going to spend like 10 minutes trying to remember who it was. But yeah, the Italian Magnum photographer that goes to all these... Pardon? No, the younger guy. He's total recluse. But he... Pardon? No. Yeah. God. Anyway... I'll Google it later. Yeah, but he sort of wanders around in the rubble and finds these very small things. It's not the big sensationalized moment. It's not the death and the destruction and the sensationalism and the drama that's really interesting to him. It's actually these small things that kind of connect daily life with war, that kind of have a Maloney. Someone Maloney. Yeah. So, yeah, that's sort of the same idea, that same sort of contrast working, but in reverse, you know. So, cool.
Aishah, I remember you saying something to me when you came to talk to us last year, and you said that your work is always the same, like whether you work commercially or whether you work personally, like it's always the same style. That's what you get when you book you. I love that idea that you started off this road and this is the way you photograph in that documentary way. And that's the way you, because a lot of us change. And I guess that kind of stems from that documentary.
Yeah, I think so. That's really interesting that you remembered that. I think John and I have talked about this before. Like your ethics and like your ethics in photography and the way you approach like different things, whether it be like personal work or commercial work, also comes from I guess your own personality and the way that you engage with the world. Also, kind of it comes out like in the way that you approach your own photography. And I think for me that's very hand in hand. Like if I'm lucky enough to do like work commercially in the way that I shoot personally, like that's amazing. But I think the world is a bit more open to that different styles of photographing, and I think that's what's really exciting about documentary photography as well. Because I think now, I guess, what we've seen in the past couple of years is like there's such a documentary photography is so open, and so it's not one distinct style. It can be soft, or it can be loud, it can be subtle, and it can be, you can work with archival material. It's so broad, and I think that's what's exciting about moving forward in documentary photography and what's out there as well. And, you can see that with the APA Awards too. Like we judge documentary and I judge people, but there's a lot of work in the people category that could have been documentary as well.
Yeah, definitely. One thing sort of following on from that as well that kind of came up in the discussion a lot is about this idea of photographing people, having respect for them. A lot of stuff that's happened in social media and things the last few years with cancel culture and all that sort of thing as well. And like a lot of people in the room, it's probably made us sort of reflect on our practice and things as well. And especially the last few years, it's kind of given everyone a chance to refresh and kind of come to terms with their own approach and what they do, maybe adjust things a little bit, adjust things a lot, I'm not sure. But I think I've come to quite a positive kind of point with it on many occasions as well. The other thing that's really interesting that we were discussing was that, so of everyone I've ever asked to photograph in my whole life, which would be hundreds and hundreds of people, I think, only 2 people have said no. And I knew that they were going to say no before I asked them, and I knew I just got a little bit greedy for 2 people, probably. But, and also, once you take those pictures and something is kind of revealed that they haven't performed for you or given for you, it's a really amazing form of connection between 2 human beings. It's a really amazing way for you to both discover something about yourselves together, or about the person in the picture, or about the way that I photographed it. It sort of starts to forge these connections, and I suppose at some point I just wanted to open my big mouth and say that, because I think it's something that's kind of been a little bit forgotten recently, that there's this mechanical thing called a camera, but really it's about these connections between people. I've photographed friends that I've known for a really long time, and we've found something completely new about how we relate to each other, or who they are, or who I am. And I'm thinking particularly of a friend of mine, Matt, who just like kind of bawled for 15 minutes at the end of it, you know, and it has that capacity. And I just really wanted to mention that it's a really good thing to remember about what we all do at the moment, you know.
I mean, I think that, I've had so many conversations with John about photographing people, and often photographing people you don't know, or, you know, you've just met, because most of my work has revolved around personal relationships, whether it's like my relationship with my partner or my family. And so that kind of rapport is already built over, you know, so many years and time. Whereas for me, photographing new people has been a new experience, and that's something that I've only come into this year. And talking to John, it was great just hearing his experience, and just made me think about time and how important time is when the time you have with someone, and the time that you spend with that person photographing or talking to them, and what happens, and looking at people as people and not subjects, I think is really important. And often, those experiences are really positive for both parties. And I know for myself, I often, when I go into photographing someone I don't know, I often have to make myself comfortable. So I know first, because I know that makes the person I'm photographing comfortable.
We maybe in our rehearsal, we did a little hot seat of each other. We did, what do you do when you first walk in? Because no one ever talks about it, right? And it's, everyone in here would do something different. So to be able to sort of talk about it and then ask why do you do that? And this is why one of the things we really wanted to talk about was your personality and your approach. It was kind of there from the beginning. It all seems to stem from that. So your version of, you have photographed your inner world a lot and your close family.
Yeah.
I've always photographed the opposite. I came from a completely different family to you. I came from, without getting too into it, a family where I felt like I was trying to read people and do the right thing, or else there were kind of consequences, sort of thing. So I felt like I could read people, and I looked for things beyond my family for a family experience. So that's what I do when I work with strangers, for example. But I used to do that working in youth detention with children. I was a behaviour teacher for the education department up in Queensland, and that all kind of was really, if I look back on it now, that's 80% of my photography process. It was my personality and the relationships I already had with other people. Whereas yours is different, but you've branched out now. You're just doing a commission at the moment, aren't you? That is photographing strangers, and it's something totally new, and I don't know if it's terrifying or not, but it's totally new for you.
It's extremely terrifying. Like, there's so many times I've had to psych myself out, and I still have to psych myself up every time, you know, I'm going into meeting someone. And even though I've talked to them online or something like that, but nothing compares to when you're actually there, or in this instance, actually in their own home, and you have to make images of them in their personal space. And I guess you don't have much time either. And so I think I like to say that I'm like an extroverted introvert, because like when I'm in it, it's the most exciting thing, but it's all the thinking before it that's terrifying. And I often like, I'll often go into someone's home and not even pick up the camera. I'll put so much time into building conversation with them that, you know, by the time I get to photographing, I only have, you know, 5 minutes or they have to leave. But for me, that makes me comfortable. And I know that when I'm comfortable, my subjects are comfortable, and then it's kind of a free flow from there. Like their guard drops, my guard drops, and it's like I'm not even there. And I find that time before, like talking to people, and is so much more about my own confidence and being comfortable. Like weirdly enough to say, rather than the person I'm photographing, it's actually more about me.
How you feel.
Yeah, how I feel.
We talked about that. Do you guys know Renika Dijkstra, the Dutch? Let's get some interaction going here. Hands up if you know who Renika Dijkstra is. So Renika Dijkstra in the early 2000s did this amazing work about, you would have seen pictures of kids on beaches, and it was from all around Europe / the world kind of thing. But it started with her taking a self-portrait, and she realised that she was trying to look a certain way for the portrait. So she created these poses, shot children in bathing suits, which I don't know if you could even do that now, to be really honest. But and she was looking for that moment, not where someone looked beautiful, but where you could see how important it was to them that they looked beautiful. So she looked for that really particular thing. So she had a whole process that she applied in order to reach that moment. And she shot on a big, large format camera, and where you had to reload each slide individually. And so she would just sit there. Now, apparently, I know someone that used to work with her, and said that she's got the exact opposite personality to me, whereas I'm kind of trying to read the room and people please and blah, 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 blah. Renika does not give a shit at all. So, Harriet, I'm going to use you as an example. So she will stand there and she'll go to photograph. Yeah. And in her very stern Dutch way, she would just wait you out because she knows that it's going to create that awkwardness that she's after. So within 3 frames, she gets this perfect moment. And she's, in the world at the moment, she's the only photographer that's kind of, I know the Met did a worldwide exhibition and it was like Picasso, Kandinsky, Dijkstra, so it's pretty renowned work, you know. But yeah, she had that process that came from that sort of sternness in her personality. And she refined and she refined and she refined as she worked it. That wouldn't work for you.
No way. No, absolutely not. No, 100%. I think I would be screaming inside.
Yeah. So a hot seat. Should we talk about what do you do? So you would tell them who you were photographing, and then I'll put you under the pump and give you some questions.
Tell you.
Oh, yeah. So when you were in Queensland,
who were
you were photographing.
Oh yeah. So I was photographing, really like young adults, you know, in their 20s, basically about how it feels to live in a share house and like how their futures look like in the housing crisis. And most of these people I've only talked to online. So this is kind of the first physical instance that we've met. And, you know, I've only got 2 to 3 hours. You know, you're also working around people's times as well. And I think there's a certain pressure with that. You know, they're doing something for you, but at the first instance, what are you doing for them? But I think that comes as you continue to photograph. So, you know, at the end of most of these sessions, they actually, you know, I've been thanked that things have been documented because they wouldn't have documented their own lives and their personal lives. And I think that's often really interesting.
Yeah, and yet you feel so kind of invasive doing it. It's
exactly.
Really
yeah.
So, but do you so tell us, so like when you walk in, what's the first thing that you do?
Yeah, well, I'll probably take my shoes off because I'm a no.
So I don't always take my shoes off.
But I just start. It's a really kind of casual conversation about how's the day. You know, I actually
do you guys like sit down together, or do you just have a chat at the?
Yeah, well, I get invited inside. We sit down. They're like, "Do you want water?" Because Queensland's stinking hot, and all these houses don't have fans, so it's it's a hot box. But we sit down, and for me it's mostly daily chat, and then I kind of go, part of this process, I sit them down and ask them a few questions about their future and how to live, how does it feel to live in a share house? And because these kids are only in their early 20s, they've just left home, and this whole kind of arrangement is new. And just for context, I grew up in Malaysia, so there's no such thing as share houses. You live with your parents or you live with your extended family. So for me, share housing has been really interesting to look at because these kids are in such a really interesting part of their life. And so I sit down and talk to them, and I go, my phone, I'm just going to put my phone on record, but it's going to be just a really casual conversation. And often there's a couple of people in the share house there too, and then the conversation kind of becomes their own. I'm almost not in the room anymore. And I think...
From when you guys start to talk and catch up?
Absolutely.
It just morphs away from you?
Yeah, and once that happens...
And do you purposely sit quiet, become quiet?
Yeah.
It's you're okay.
Absolutely,
cool.
And I think that's the interesting part. That's where I feel most comfortable. That's where all the anxiety and all the stress...
become invisible, I
suppose.
Okay.
And then from then, they don't know, the camera doesn't feel like it's there. And for me, that's when I feel most comfortable documenting. And then it feels weird to say, but it's almost a free-for-all because it's like I'm not there and they have trust in what I'm trying to communicate or document. And because I'm shooting on film as well, they don't see any of the images or anything until I get back to Melbourne.
And do you keep quite a distance from them, or do you kind of move in, or what do you do when you're photographing and they're just going about there?
Yeah, I'm weirdly close. I'm always close, and it's such a weird experience because I often after I do a shoot, I'll call Sean and be like, it was like I wasn't even there. When you look at images, you have a favorite photographer or photographers that you enjoy looking at, and you're like, how did they get those images? How were they there? And there are moments like that where I'm like, wow, this is it. This is how people do it. This is how people get close.
So you're kind of using time as a durational kind of strategy.
Absolutely.
To get people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'd rather talk to people more than the actual physical part of the photographing. And I think that's just because I feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah.
But it may,
And so then, this is what we were doing the other day, and it was kind of quite revealing for me anyway, so if you guys don't like it, it doesn't matter.
It can change the conversation.
But, so in terms of using light and things as a photographer, wherever they sit is just wherever they sit for you? You don't kind of look for places and kind of move in that way, or you just wherever they are is how it is and you go from there?
Kind of wherever they are. I'm always noticing the light and the natural light, but I almost, for me, it feels invasive to tell them where to be. Even though there's so many times where you look at a situation and go, oh, if they were just there,
But you wouldn't tell them, huh?
I just go, okay, this is
Interesting.
It almost feels, I feel it feels confronting to. I feel like the moment drops then for me. Yeah. And so I let it be, even if the light's not great or there could be, the light streaming in on the other side of the room and I'm noticing it. You just leave it. I leave it.
Because it's too much of a trade-off. You lose something that's more important to you, essentially.
I think so. Yeah. And I think it's there's things when they talk about there's sometimes, humans can't look at each other in the eyes for too long. It's, but with this, with the way that I kind of approach these situations, it's like you locked eyes for so long, you don't want to, break the moment or what you've created. Yeah, I would never ask them to move.
So, as Aishah's partner, would you say that this might be personality related?
I see the light of someone, I start to sweat. Put them over there to make it a bit better. But it's interesting because Australia is so much about light. Yeah. The documentary tradition from newspapers, magazines, the history of photography in Australia, street photography, it'd be hard to argue it's not centered around an appreciation of light. And I think what's interesting is that people from overseas, different people with different backgrounds, different approaches, start to bring this different awareness into documentary photography.
yeah, it's interesting. And so what about, so you wouldn't just photograph that one scene? I've seen pictures and you photograph someone in their bedroom, and so how does that come about? Have you've enough's happened here, or?
Yeah, often the conversations can vary for, an hour or, 15 minutes. At first, I got nervous if they weren't over 30 minutes. I'm like, 10 minutes is, not enough. Like, surely there's more, but it's also not forcing people out of their own comfort zones, because you often, and I think also coming from a place where, I photographed really personally, I photographed myself, you're comfortable with being with the camera or around the camera. These are people who, they've never really been photographed or had someone photograph them. So I would say it's quite a special moment. We often, I think, as photographers, forget about that and the experience of someone who doesn't get photographed or have a camera around. Even though, like we've talked about having Instagram and having a phone and documenting that way, I think it's totally different. And so often after the conversation, if there's 5 people in a share house, I'll often, talk to another person and go, can I see your bedroom? And then conversation keeps on going, but because the main bit of talking is done, they're so comfortable. And
so even when they go in the bedroom, it's still quite comfortable, and they'll just kind of crack on with what they're doing, sort of
absolutely
thing.
yeah.
Okay, cool.
And I think what's interesting with this project is that I don't live in Brisbane, so it's not like I'm part of their friend group or anything like that. But now, when I go back to Melbourne, the people I still in contact with. Like the other day, I got invited to one of their parties, so it was a bit I was like, wow, okay, I've kind of it feels like I'm part of your life. This is strange.
Cool. Very cool. Yep. Yeah, I kind of stopped when COVID happened, but yeah. Yep. When I first started doing it, I knew that I really needed to. As a total generalisation, when everyone starts, there's a distance that a lot of people photograph from when they're first starting out in photography, and it's based around your comfort as a photographer. And then you realise at some point that the way that you should be photographing is either further back or closer. But everyone kind of has this sort of standard distance, and I was kind of at a point where I was like, this isn't giving me what I am actually experiencing. So, too far. Yeah, definitely too far. And I was also really interested in wanting to kind of... I was very aware I was going to a third world country, that I was a 6 foot tall, 95 kilo white guy with a $15,000 piece of kit hanging around his neck, so you get a certain amount of attention, and you're treated in a certain way. In some ways, it's always treated like it's in really remote areas, like it's an opportunity, and I didn't want that at all. So I kind of thought about ways that I could undo that. And the only way that I thought of was staying for a really long time, so that I became dependent on them for food and water and living and things like that. So that kind of started to become my process, and it also created the kind of intimacy. So there wasn't just the intimacy of the actual physical distance, but the intimacy in the relationships with people that I wanted. And I kind of wanted to... I'm saying this for the second time, so it's scaring me, but without getting too deep... I had quite a few things in my life happen back in Australia that kind of went awry, and I went, wow, I really need to kind of learn and try something completely different. So I kind of wanted to go over there and experience something different and see if there was something that I was kind of missing out on, or that would be beneficial for me. So I kind of went with that premise as well. So those physical actions, staying with people for long periods of time, being at their mercy, so I wasn't there as like a client, or I wasn't there as a customer. I was there as someone that was just really thankful that I could sit down with the family and eat and stuff. And that kind of changed all the decisions that I started to make as a photographer. Everything from, like, it goes right down to your base, your depth of field, where you sit in the room. whether you go for light or for the personal experience, or how you balance that out, whether you use language or not. So I decided not to use any language because I wanted to be purely observational, which I suppose comes back to, again, you guys are probably working me out by then, I pretty much point to the same thing from 7 different angles, but this idea that I wanted people to be being really authentic and not performing for me. So that was a way of achieving that too. No language, so you become ignored in the room. You don't know what's going on. You just hear, or you just see what's going on. So gestures, body language, light, and that's the only information your brain's receiving. So that's how you start to read and see things. And the other one was that I didn't want to know anything about the place that I was going to. And that was because I'd heard a lot about when you go travelling, whether it's your mother or someone else goes, oh, I've heard that place is dangerous and are you really going to go there? And they're not, Mongolia's not a dangerous place, don't get me wrong, but there seems to be a perception of places before you go there that seems to be very, very strong, almost to the point where people feel like they've been there, but they haven't. And there was one place that was a little town based entirely on illegal coal mining, and I heard all these horrible stories in Ulaanbaatar, in the capital, that there were people from China there that didn't have passports, that lived permanently underground in the mines, that there were murders under there, that if you go down there you'll be beaten and stabbed, you'll never come out, blah, blah, blah. And that was the first time I knew anything about where I was going, because I just had some friends in Ulaanbaatar that had family all around Mongolia, and they just literally take me to the bus stop and one of their relatives would be there and I'd just stay with them. So it was kind of becoming a really good process. But this one, when I went to this coal mine, I realised how different I was, how cagey I was, how I was expecting something bad to happen. I started looking for the sensational. It just changed completely what happened with the place. So I kind of made a decision, no language, no information from that day on. So all those things, there's probably about 4 or 5 things that I mentioned in there, but they all started to kind of happen quite organically. Yeah. That's right, it's your event, mate, if you want to do that. Yeah, more so than if there was talking, and more so than if I was with friends and family.
Was that one-sided, or was that?
No, definitely two-sided. You become really involved with things that happen, and you kind of you bond through experiences. Like, like one place I was staying at, a kid was playing with. So the family I was staying with, their young son was playing with hot oil that once they cook, they put it outside. And he basically burnt all of the skin off his arm from about here down. And, we all rallied around and we got on the motorbikes and drove, however many kilometres through the night into town. And I was kind of on the back and Dad was driving. And it's things like that that are glue, It's so much bigger than anything you could ever say. So yeah, when stuff like that happens and, yeah, you kind of, you are different. So you can offer different things and they offer different things, and it becomes a kind of a bond in a way, So, yeah. So because I had a couple that in Ulaanbaatar that I met that I'd always stay with when I first flew in. And they would tell me, oh, we've got an auntie in Burra, so, do you want to go and stay with her? And I'd be like, yeah. So they'd give them a call in Mongol, say, hey, we've got this big buffhead coming to stay with you. Pick him up at the bus. And, like I'd be eating with them and saying, so I'd say, how much do they want? It's like a rent and board thing. Is it okay if I take pictures? So Chuka, who's the lady in the couple, she'd talk to her family or partners. And then afterwards, I'd present what I'm doing with Chuka, and she'd show them, mention it. And I'd work pretty long form, so I had plenty of time. And in the moment is just hilariously interesting with that. Like, I would never I don't shoot on the first day, of course, or the second or the third often. I really take my time. The first couple of days, the children that are staying there take more photos than I do, because they just run around with the camera. And so it just becomes this kind of fun game. One other thing that always happens, and it happens in Australia too, but people think you work for a real estate agency here, whereas over there I don't know what they think you work for. But you'll be out in the street or somewhere and you're taking a photo, and people come around, hey, oh, and they come running down, and you just put your arm around them and show them what you're taking a picture of without any language, and just go, and you can just tell it's never what they actually think is going to be on the back of the camera. In Australia you get this, oh, it's just some arty shit. I thought you were from the real estate. So it's kind of, it's just a universal thing that you can make fun and work with. You don't even need language, it's more of a connection, you know? So, yeah.
Did you ever feel like at the start it was transactional, but your approach changed, or were you always very conscious from the beginning to not let it be like that? And how did you make people feel comfortable in the room with all sort of process?
Me? Yeah. I'm a lot like Aishah in that, like, I think the most anxious person in the room will always be me. And I don't actually believe that at the time, but I'm so nervous about things that it makes it, I think it's a really healthy thing. It probably makes you miss opportunities, you know. But it's great because it gives you a really acute awareness to that all the time. So if you it's very hard to step out of that. And then there's constant checking, showing, seeing how people do. I've made mistakes, that's for sure, yeah. And we were talking about that Baldwin Lee story.
Yes, yeah.
Do you remember that? So he was, has anyone heard, it's on like that Magic Hour podcast, there's a Baldwin Lee interview, and he's a pretty zany dude. But he made that work that came out with Hunter Point Press recently. Do you know that, Tom? Have you guys seen it? Amazing seminal.
Yeah, black and white images of the South.
So, South. Yeah. African Americans in the South in like the 80s. He's a Chinese immigrant, and he photographed there. And these pictures have just laid in his filing cabinet, and he brought them out. And people were like, "Why didn't you do anything with them? What happened?" And he said, "Well, you know, I photographed all the time for about 3 or 4 years." And then he said, and then one day I was walking down the street, and there was a man who had one leg, living in a really poor part of America. He just looked like he was in a horrible state, and he was trying to mow his lawn. And he said, I saw it as an opportunity, and then I checked myself and realised that I saw it as an opportunity, and I stopped the project. You know, so it's kind of that sort of thing, and you never get it right all the time. You always try. It's like, oh, this sounds deep. It's like life. So yeah, but I think if you've got that awareness of it all the time, that's great. And I know for other, like Renika Dexter doesn't give a shit. There's no doubt about it. She goes for it, and that's her, and that's fine as well. But that's my approach. Yeah.
There's often, would you say, like a lot of self-doubt in that process? Like you're not 100% totally sure of yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm the opposite to you. I feel like when I'm shooting, I feel like I'm just messing everything up all the time, and I'm really anxious all the time. Beforehand, I'm fine. I don't have a problem at all. Afterwards, for a little while, I feel like I didn't do what I should have done, which I think is always the case with everything. And then it takes me a long while to come back to enjoying the images that I took, which is probably one of the reasons why it takes me so long to publish. It's, again...
time.
Yeah. So, yeah. Your turn. So your turn. So your turn. Go on, look at your notes and get on with it.
The conversation, I think, actually.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any further questions? Yeah?
yourself into the scene, as it were, and relate well with the people. Situations where you use flash, or is it always ambient light? And I mean, that's a bit of the digital, but you're using the film.
Before working with other people, a lot of my work photographing and like my relationship was actually flash. And so I think moving into working with people, like people that I don't know, I actually wanted a break, so I haven't really been using flash. But I have been with the work that I've been doing with my family, and that's totally new. And that started after COVID because I couldn't see them for 3 years. And before that, I had never photographed my family, my mum or dad or anything like that. So that's also a new experience. But I started using a bit of flash in that too, and that was an interesting experience. But I guess they felt really comfortable, and it doesn't really disrupt the moment either. I think it's this acceptance that I'm just going to be around with a camera, and I think it would be the same with working with the kids in the share houses too. I think they would be, I guess, a bit shocked for 5 seconds, but then kind of forget about it. But yeah, flash. But yeah, it's something I would love to go back to, I think. Yeah.
I've got 2 projects in Australia at the moment where I'm completely using it and really using it. Yeah, so some of the decisions around it were things like, in these projects, it's really important that you see the individual and you see the faces of people and see who they are, and you see them as an individual person, not a certain group. So Flash was great for that because Flash brings up a lot of detail in a person. So that was a decision I made really early on after a bit of testing and checking, and when the pictures originally weren't giving me what I wanted them to, I was like, yeah, okay, I need to illuminate this more. And then overall, light's really important in my work. Like both of us, we photograph daily life, and light's one of the best ways to illuminate things that you see are important that are just day to day. And yeah, you can't, there are times when flash is great to do that, really great to do that. So yeah, it's always a balancing act. It's artificial, of course, so there's a temptation to go, but it just serves such a purpose sometimes, and it's so great, and it's small, and it's portable, and it's pretty non-intrusive, really, from what I've only started using it the last 2 years for some projects, and yeah. So yeah, there's decisions to be made in there, but it's a useful tool. Yeah. Any other questions? What about all those people I paid to ask intelligent questions at the end of the talk? Anu? Yep.
And her sternness eliciting a awkward stance on her work, I think it's kind of very awkward. And you're talking about how you are awkward yourself, and therefore you
Yep.
sit. Do you think your portraits and anyone's documentary portraits, obviously portraits reveal something about the sitter, but do they reveal something about the person who's behind the camera? And how much, where do you think the balance is? Because I'd say that Renee, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah. Anyway, I've always struggled with it. There's clearly, she's making me feel awkward, and they're amazing photographs, but is that the personality or is that the photographer? I don't know. It's not really a question, it's kind of like a, yeah.
No, it's good, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've been thinking about this for a while. A while now. Yeah, I think it's definitely very much of I would say of the person taking the photograph. I bet. I mean, from my point of view, but I think it's a strange middle ground.
There's a real weird balance, isn't there? Yeah. I mean, when I've taken some portraits, which I feel very awkward doing, I don't know if I'm making them feel awkward, and therefore was that them, or was that them responding to me? And you wanted to be them, but you're not always necessarily them. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't.
I think it's definitely both, and they're related, for sure. Like even, especially judging this competition, you could see a lot about the photographer. Would you agree? Anu. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's interesting, is that you're seeing what you wouldn't see. You know, like you see a photograph about, for example, a mother photographing their child. Like, I'm never going to be able to see that. But through photography, I can see that love that child's only going to ever have for that mother. You know, so the fact that if you can... The thing that's really interesting about photography as compared to just seeing in the world is that we have all of these things that we can change and alter to really draw that relationship out. And when you start to think about them and play with them, all of a sudden you have this kind of unique voice, you know. But it's definitely always both, I think.
I always think about it, it's kind of like suddenly you go, oh, maybe I'm really, and that's when you go back and go, oh,
yeah. Well, there's lots of ways. Am I talking too much? Okay. I have to check. Okay. Okay. So settle in, folks. No. No. Yeah. So, for example, working with that, based on how much time I have in a place, I will change entirely what I do, and my self-talk inside will be really different because I know what's going to happen with that dynamic. So if I want something really real and free, and I've got 3 months, I can just sit in the corner. You know, I've got time. I can just watch and get really meditative about what I'm doing. If I've been sent on a commission to do something and I have to turn up and take a picture of someone that's dressed up to the nines and trying to look exactly like they want to, and I still want to get something free and real, I have to do something different. I have to have a different strategy, and I have to act differently. So I have to become very confident then, and I have to ask for certain things. So a good example of that is David Goldblatt used to do a lot of commissions when he was alive as well, and he realised that a lot of the time, and a lot of people that do commissions will probably relate to this. Ross, I know you'll relate to this. You get, especially when there's a TV commercial or a video component or something, often you get very, very little time. And he started to find that people were being interviewed by the journalist, and he was getting like 10 seconds at the end or 30 seconds at the end. And he was like, I can't do anything with that. So he used his 10 seconds, but he never photographed in the 10 seconds. He photographed after and before, because that's when they'd let their guard down, and that's when they'd do their thing. So your whole attitude and how you reacted and what you did with your anxiety had to change in order to get the same thing out of a person in a shorter time, kind of thing. So it's malleable, and I think that's one of the great things about photography. Yeah. Yep. What are you doing? You're on film, so you must look through. Do you? Oh no, that's not true, is it?
Yeah, look through the viewfinder. Yeah, I'd say, yeah, often it comes second. I'm actually looking at it without the camera first. Like I'll be holding the camera, but I'll be looking first, and then I'll look through the viewfinder. So often it's before the camera is to my eye. Yeah.
Yeah, for me that's like a technology change. So when we went from seeing through mirrors to the digital images that we see, I made that transition pretty well. Like the cameras I've got at the moment, I don't notice that I'm actually not looking through mirrors, but I've never been able to do the back of screen thing. I just can't. Yeah, if I have to, because I can't get low enough or I can't get in there, I'll do it, but that's the only time. Otherwise, and look, if I'm really honest, God, why do I say these things? You kind of feel like you're not there when you've got the camera up to your face. Like it gives you a little bit more courage. Like you go, no one can see me because I've got a camera on my face, you know? And maybe that plays into it a bit for me too. Yeah. Yeah, so what I'm doing there is I'm breaking apart what I would, in Mongolia, for example, I would try and do all in one hit. I'm breaking it into different segments. So we'll find that frame. So, because Ross is the best producer in Australia, by the way. He's seen a lot of people photographing. Ross Colbatch. So, yeah, I'll set up what I want, but I'm still looking for... So the easiest way to talk about this doing things authentically is an off moment, yeah? So if I sit and I go to take your picture, as soon as you think I'm taking your picture, you're going to give me something that you want me to see, but before and after that, you're not. So I can set everything, and then I bring the person in, and everything is fake from the very beginning, but then I just wait till they switch off, or I get them while they're walking in or while they're walking out. I've got a couple of pictures of you like that are good, actually. And the classic story, should we tell the Richard Avedon story? Oh, yeah. So the classic thing about this, and I tell this to high school students, and they just eyes go like this. But, you know, the Queen, the beginning of Instagram, as far as I'm concerned, was Marilyn Monroe, right? Because she was a character. She was a brand. That's not even her name. And she was famous for every single time a camera was around. She was playing Marilyn. She was never herself. And she was so damn good at it and took the world by storm, of course. So Richard Avedon was asked to photograph her and went, there is no real photographs of this person. So the story goes, and I've heard it 9 millionth hand, so this time might not be right, that he brought her in the studio to do this sort of shoot, and he took a couple of pictures, and then he just stood there and tried to wait her out. And he's basically went, I'm just going to wait here until you break character. And the story goes, it was like 2 hours and she didn't. So he went, took the picture and said, right, that's it. And then she went, oh, took the second picture. And they reckon that's the only real photograph of the person who was Marilyn Monroe. So it's just that, it's the same process, it's just that you're breaking it up into small pieces to try and attain the same thing, I suppose. Yeah.
Bad wolf and put a bit of a end to the session there, because I think we've kind of run quite a bit over, and I'm sure these guys have been speaking for so long, and I'm sure that they would love to speak to you if anyone has any more questions to come up. But thank you both so much. I just think you're both, having worked with you on the committee this year and just hearing you guys talk as well, I think you're both so considered and so ethical in your practice, and to see your work come out, and your work is amazing and your photos are beautiful, but it goes beyond that. It's much more about, you know, what you're trying to say beyond just pretty photos, and that is just so special, I think. So congratulations to both of you for just being amazing, and thank you so much for doing our tour.
Thanks, everyone.
A few more questions if anyone has any. Otherwise, let's go and have a drink at the bar and let's continue to celebrate. We have 3 more talks tomorrow. Please come back. They'll all be just amazing. No, thank you so much. Yes! Well done. You guys are great. Well done.
Hey.